Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie. It's about a heist, but not in a bank. This one happened inside what's supposed to be one of the most secure places on the internet, Apple's Safari. Just picture this for a second. You're on your computer, you've got a tab open to some random website, maybe reading the news, and right next to it in another tab is your Gmail. Now, what if that first website could just reach over and start reading your private emails? Sounds wild, right?
Especially on your iPhone or your Mac. I mean, that's the whole Apple promise, isn't it? Top-notch security and privacy. An attack like that it shouldn't be possible. But, well, a team of security researchers proved it was. Okay, let's really get into how they did it.
And they gave it a name that's pretty on the nose, iLeakage. This wasn't just some simple bug. It was a really sophisticated attack that went after the very heart of what makes Apple devices so fast, the hardware itself. They found a way to turn Apple's greatest strength into a massive vulnerability.
Okay, so to really get how this heist worked, you've got to understand the vault they were trying to crack. And Safari, it's basically a digital fortress. It's got these powerful layers of security built specifically to stop exactly this kind of snooping.
So the first big wall is something called site isolation. The easiest way to think about it is this. Every single website tab you open gets its own locked, totally separate, soundproof room. This is super important. It's what's supposed to stop, evilwebsite.com from peeking into what's happening in your gmail.com tab.
And the second line of defense, well, it's kind of like taking away the attacker's most important tool, a high-precision stopwatch. See, a lot of these advanced attacks rely on measuring incredibly tiny events inside the processor. We're talking nanoseconds. So Apple, and other browser makers too, basically nerfed the timers. They made them way too slow and clumsy for that kind of super subtle spy work.
So there you have it. Locked rooms and no precision tools. It really should have been an impossible target. But the iLeakage researchers found a way. They came up with this incredibly clever, multi-step plan to get past every single one of those defenses.
And here's the blueprint for the entire heist. It breaks down into 4 key steps. First, the break-in, getting past that site isolation. Second, the speculative guess, which is all about exploiting how the computer's brain works. Third, the timerless trick, a genius way to measure things without a watch. And finally, the master key, which lets them read, well, pretty much anything. Let's break down exactly how they pulled off each step.
All right, step 1, the break-in. You'd think this would be the hardest part, but the crack in the fortress was surprisingly simple. The researchers found out that if an attacker's website uses a totally normal command to open a pop-up window, you've seen these a million times, Safari, just to be a little faster, would actually put both the attacker's page and the victim's page in the same secure room. And just like that, the first wall was down.
Okay, now we're getting to the real core of this thing. Modern processors, the brains of our devices, are kind of like an overeager assistant. To be super fast, they're always trying to guess what you're going to do next, and they start working on it ahead of time. This is called speculative execution. The huge problem is sometimes that assistant grabs sensitive data it really shouldn't have access to. And even though the CPU realizes its mistake and throws the result away, it leaves behind these faint traces, little clues that it touched something it shouldn't have.
But wait, how do you even spot those tiny traces if you don't have a high-precision stopwatch? Remember, Safari took that tool away. This was the next big puzzle the attackers had to solve.
The whole secret is in something called the CPU cache. Just think of it as the processor's super fast short-term memory. If the data it needs is already in the cache, that's a cache hit, getting it is lightning fast. But if it has to go get the data from further away, a cache miss, it's way, way slower. And that tiny difference in time, fast versus slow, that's the signal the attackers are listening for.
So this is where it gets really clever. How do they solve the timer problem? Instead of trying to time one thing, they started a race. They'd have 2 processes, and one would try to access the data. If that access was super fast, a cache hit, it would win the race. If it was slow, a cache miss, it would lose. So just by seeing who won the race, they could tell if it was a hit or a miss. No stopwatch needed. Brilliant, right?
Okay, so at this point, the attackers are in the same room, and they've got their timeless measurement trick. The last step was to forge the master key. They basically tricked the CPU by creating this special, innocent-looking piece of data. Then when the processor was doing its overeager speculative work, it would get confused and mistakenly treat that object as if it were the secret text from the victim's webpage. And that gave the attacker a tiny, fleeting window to read the contents of that secret text.
So that's the how. I know. It's an incredibly complex chain of exploits, but let's get to the what. What kind of information could this attack actually steal? And honestly, the results are genuinely chilling. Just look at this. On the left, you've got a normal Gmail inbox, and on the right, that's the raw text from that inbox. Subject lines, the content of the emails, all of it extracted character by character by the iLeakage attack, running from a totally different, malicious website.
And it wasn't just limited to email. If you had your Android phone linked to your browser with Google Messages, the attack could literally pull your private text messages right off the screen.
But this is probably the most damaging part. The attack could actually open a Google login page. Wait for a password manager like LastPass to autofill your password, and then just steal it right out of the browser's memory. All of this happening before you even get a chance to click the login button. Scary stuff.
And look, this wasn't just some slow theoretical attack. The researchers were getting data out at a rate of about 30 bits per second. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, right? It's not exactly broadband speed, but it's more than fast enough to snatch a complex password in just a few seconds, or to steal the entire text of a short email in under a minute.
Okay, so this is a pretty terrifying story, but I promise, it does have a good ending. The researchers who found iLeakage, they weren't the bad guys. They were academics, white hat hackers working to make all of our digital lives safer. And the very first thing they did was take all their findings straight to Apple.
And this is what's called responsible disclosure. You can see the timeline here. They told Apple about the bug way back in September 2022, and then they actually worked with Apple's engineers to figure out the best way to fix it. And then, once the patches were ready, Apple released them to everyone.
So Apple rolled up its sleeves and got to work reinforcing the vault. First, they fixed that break-in loophole. Now, every new window, pop-ups included, gets its own separate secure room. No more exceptions. Then, to deal with all that speculative guessing, they basically put digital stop signs in for the CPU, forcing it to wait for security checks before it can race ahead. And finally, they just removed some of those really aggressive performance tricks that the attackers had so cleverly used against them. The walls were officially patched.
And that really brings us to the big, lingering question here. The iLeakage attack wasn't just some simple coding mistake. It was a clever exploitation of the very complexity that makes our devices so incredibly powerful. The very features that are designed to make our computers faster, like speculative execution, can also, it turns out, create these really subtle vulnerabilities. So it leaves us with this crucial question for the future of tech. As our devices get smarter and faster, how do we protect them from their own cleverness? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.